Hello there, HRC Stanley back again with another little on topic little video of mine, unscripted this time around. Um, today I wanted to continue on a video I did about a month or two ago, where I listed some ideas of what I could imagine as kind of firefight maps based on the original Halo trilogy. First time around, I looked at the very first game of the series, Halo Combat Evolved, and I thought I would continue on that with Halo 2, especially since, by the time we're recording this, it has been about, how do I say this? It's been 17 years since that game first released. Yes, one of my childhood games, the game that introduced me to the Halo franchise, has just turned 17. Boy, do I feel that old. But anyways, yeah, I wanted to continue on that by talking about what I could imagine what Halo 2 would be like with Firefight maps. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Now right off the bat, the Kairos station level already gives us a bit of an idea to what could work as a potential firefight map. I might have brought up how last time I was kind of struggling a bit of what could make a good firefight map out of the Pillar of Autumn level. This time though, I've got a good idea, and that's when partway through that level you come across the Pelican docking bay, and where the Covenant would have these like boarding crafts come in, and they would like spawn out various grunts and elites, and just thinking about it, they just having the crafts just kind of leave as soon as they run out of like reinforcements, and then it will come back to bring in some more like brutes and hunters and jackals, and all the while your weapons spawn. That area alone is just begging to be made into a firefight map. It's a bit like the Anchor 9 level multiplayer map from Halo Reach, or even the Corvette level, the firefight map based on the Long Night of Solace, where they would have like the spirits or phantoms like pass through the hangars, and they would drop by a few enemies, and they'll just kind of leave the other way out. Something like that could work here, and they could have the boarding crafts like barge in through like the hangar doors or whatever, and like I said, they will bring out the enemies, and as soon as they run out or like a wave or a round is done, they would kind of like leave out for a bit and just kind of stay out for a bit, and all the while they give you time to kind of like reload and kind of rearm yourself with respawning weapons and equipment and whatnot. And as soon as the next wave or the next round begins, the boarding craft comes back in, and more enemies come out, and it kind of rinse and repeat. I don't know. It's also pretty cool to kind of mix it up a bit, since most of these firefight maps from say ODST and Reach and that, they usually tend to be set on a planet or one of the Halo rings or installations or whatever. So I think it's kind of cool to kind of mix it up with a more space map or level or whatnot. So yeah, right off the bat, it already gives us an idea of what could work as a potential firefight map. Outskirts is another one where I think there's a good idea here for a good firefight map, and that is the opening bit where after you leave the Pelican bit, there's the whole courtyard area where you shoot and fire a bunch of jackals and grunts and elites, and even several drones, and of course the two hunters that barge in. You gotta mow them down until they drop dead, of course. Now that area there, much like the Pelican docking bay at Kairos Station, this is another one that is just, you can tell this could make a great firefight map. It's small, it's compact, but it's also very open areaed enough so that you could still have the phantoms come in and drop down, several enemies every single wave, much like most other more actual Firefight maps. This one is very much like the sword based one in from Halo Reach. I don't know the actual I forget the actual name of it. I'm a Halo geek, and to forget a simple name for a particular map, how's that happen? But yes, if you remember from Halo Reach, there's the sword based one where it's kind of like the outside of it. It's kind of like the entrance to it. It's just outside the base. This is a bit similar to that. It's small, but still very open enough to help you come up with a few strategies to kind of hide out for a bit and get kind of restock on your ammo and weapons and good areas to respawn and whatnot. That area alone is another great one that can make a fantastic Firefight map. Plus, it gives you a chance to shoot down those annoying snipers when they get on your nerves and all that. And I definitely agree, because as someone who's played the original Halo 2 back when I was like about 7 or 8ish years old, those can be a pain, and to mow them down at any chance you get, that's good karma for them. And of course, at the end of a certain wave or two, they would have, of course, the hunters barge in, and you'd get to fight them down like the original Halo campaign level. And another idea, second idea for a good Firefight map based on the outskirts level would kind of be one set at the beach area near the end, before you go through all the subways and the tunnels. It could be like the Zanzibar Last Resort maps, where you get to fight folks near a beach per se, or maybe like the high ground level from Halo 3. But of course, with that, even with all the dropping of enemies, I still have to go with the courtyard one, because I think people are more familiar with that one. It's more iconic per se. Now, Metropolis, on the other hand, is a bit tricky, because there's not really much of a proper level that could be made into a very traditional Firefight map. Of course, there is the very iconic bridge, which, as cool as it is, doesn't really lend itself to being a good singular self-contained map with spawning enemies and waves coming in for you to kind of fight and take down and all that. It might make good for a range of creative strategies, but that's probably about it. Now, one that I think could work as a kind of possible Firefight map would be the kind of the big garden area, with like the trees and like they have the kind of like the little bridges and the little lakes and all it, like ponds or lakes. I think it's like a little which you kind of go into after you go through the little tunnel at the end of the bridge, and kind of have to fight all the various ghosts and enemies, wraiths, and all those classic enemies. And just before you kind of leave them and go into the actual city itself in the Metropolis level, I think that could do well as a good, decent Firefight map. Now, would I incorporate the Scarab? I don't know. I don't think it's even ever really possible to incorporate such. I don't think it was even considered in ODST or Reach. But I think having to fight some kind of big enemy could do well as a last round of the last wave of round, or something like a squadron of wraiths, or maybe like a phantom you have to shoot and to kind of take down until it explodes or ignites or something. I don't know, but it kind of goes to show that even some levels can be a bit tricky to kind of kind of translate into Firefight maps, much like with the first game and probably the next game, which I'll be looking at in a few days with Halo 3. Now the Arbiter level, and here's where things get a bit interesting to say the least. For starters, in the level, as many of you would know, you don't play as Master Chief or any UNSC troopers or anything like. You play as one of the elites, and not just any elite. You play as the Arbiter, and honestly, he has become one of my favorite characters from the Halo franchise. Just to get that little opinion out of the way, but yeah, to make a Firefight map out of the Arbiter level is pretty a challenge. Not just trying to pinpoint which section of the map or level to make into a map, but also whether would you still be playing as either as a Spartan or elite or restricted to one or both or what. But as demonstrated, you could technically play as either a Spartan or an elite in Halo Reach Firefight. So I figured, why not the same with Halo 2 then? So for these maps, you could play as either a Spartan on the side of the Marines, or elite on the side of Grunts, Jackals, and other Covenant troops. So this could make for something very interesting. Especially note that technically you don't fight any humans in this level, not even the human flood, which I'll get into later in a bit. So here, you could have the enemies could either be the human Marines or even the heretic elites and grunts if you're playing as the Covenant elite. But if you're playing as a Spartan, you could fight either the heretic elites or the Covenant troopers and all that. So I think that could help in kind of mixing things up a bit, like different sides and all that. Maybe the heretics could utilize some of the UNSC weapons, like with the ones from Halo Reach. Although, unlike here, where the heretics are actual heretic elites and grunts with a range of Covenant weapons, the heretics from Halo Reach's Firefight were just basically Covenant models with UNSC rifles. But then they having to use new old models, I guess. But anyways, yeah. In terms of choosing a particular section, I'd probably go with the hangar near the beginning of the level, where the one where you kind of go down the lift and you have to fight off the various enemies there, so you could open the bay doors and let in the Phantom suit, give you some reinforcements. I think that could be a good section to make into a Firefight map. In it, you could have a Phantom or like a Phantom come in and kind of drop in some either Covenant enemies or Heretic enemies. Or if you're playing as the Covenant elite, it could have a Pelican come in and drop in Marines for you to fight and shoot down, which I think that's something that could have been done from Halo Reach, is that if you chose to play as an elite, you could have Marines to kind of fight and take down. Sure, it may not be as much a challenge as fighting brutes and hunters, but hey, variety of enemies and all that, right? So, yeah. Another thing I want to mention is that I'm kind of a bit bummed out that Halo Reach and its Firefight didn't really have a firefight, like a space Firefight map with that awesome space rocket jet bit in the Long Night of Solace, where you kind of fight the various space banshees and phantoms and you kind of fly across space. It was awesome playing an actual space level in a Halo game, but it's kind of a shame it's never been made into a Firefight map. So here I figured we could kind of utilize that little banshee bit and kind of fly around the kind of gas mine facility to shoot down some enemy banshees. Although technically, banshees are the only flying vehicles you could operate, but it's possible you could take down some pelicans and phantoms as well. So yeah, that's the arbiter level, and I think it could make a very interesting firefight map with a subversive range of different enemies to fight. Now the Oracle level. This is another tricky one because this is for the most part an indoors kind of level, and by indoors I mean inside a hanging, dangling gas mine facility on a big gas giant planet. But anyways, this is interesting because not only would you be fighting heretics and possibly marines as well, but also the flood. And I think it could be cool to fight waves of flood in a Halo firefight match. So you could have whether you're playing as the Spartan or Elite, you could fight the flood as well. Various infection forms, the carrier forms, and the various combat forms. And hell, even some of the Marine or Elite allies you work with could get infected enough if they get killed, which could be a very neat little detail and addition. And in terms of section from the level itself, I'd probably go with that big room with the spiral ramp staircase thing where in the level you kind of chase the heretic leader himself until he kind of reaches that little room and kind of shields you off, and he says, "I will be safe from the storm and you will be consumed," and something like that. So I think that room is big enough, yet still very, 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 very effective enough to kind of be utilized as the closest to be a firefight match per se. And what there are in each of the floors, are kind of from the ground floor to the top one, there are these various like automatic doors that could kind of unlock and open and unleash various enemies, be it Marines, Covenant, or the Flood. So I think that could be a good way to kind of let you know that a wave has come by to attack you, so you have to find them back and protect and defend the sector. And with that, I think so. Yeah, that's the Oracle is another very tricky one, but still, I think that could be another interesting and a very divert range from the various other more outdoors, more open kind of maps of Firefight. Now the Delta Halo level. The first one, Halo 2, we actually on a Halo ring, and you return to playing as Master Chief. Now, this is another tricky one, since most of that level, you're basically riding a Scorpion, or driving a Scorpion, through mostly close spaces of ancient temple ruins and whatnot. But, upon looking back at that level, I figured that the opening section where you have already landed from the those kind of drop pods, you know, the ones you have the ODSTs in, and the whole open area section where you're like near a cliff, and you have the elites and the Graza Jackals kind of waiting about on those temple ruins that you'd have to enter in to take them down and kind of carry on with the level. That could make a good firefight map as well, since it's also very similar to the one Halo Combat Evolved campaign level, which was made into a firefight map, Installation 04 from Combat Evolved Anniversary, where the section that Bungie, or rather 343 Industries, had chosen to be the Firefight map was the section where it was like one of those familiar Forerunner beam tower things, and it's right next to a cliff, and it's small, simple, yet very open spaced and very good enough for open combat. And I think this Delta Halo one could serve as a good rendition for a candidate, if you will, for a good Firefight map. It's still very open enough, so you can have phantoms come in to sending elites and hunters and brutes for you to fight and take out, or you could still play as an elite and take down various Spartans and Marines. So, so I'm still keeping that in there. I'm still keeping along that idea of you could play as either an elite or a Spartan from Halo Reach, and you can actually fight the UNSC army instead of in Halo Reach. If you chose to be an elite, and you would be only or if you're the only player, or all your players chose to be elites, you just basically be wandering around. You and your grunts and jaggals would just be wandering around doing banger all, really, just kind of waiting around for nothing to come. So yeah, I think it'd be good to have actually some actual Marines and Spartans to be enemies as well. Now, I'm sure there's not as much variety there as say grunts and drones and draggles, but I think it'll still be a good divert range nonetheless. But anyways, yeah, that famous first area of the Delta Halo map, I think that would be good as a good candidate for a Firefight map nonetheless. Regret is another level that I think might have a unique idea and potential for a Firefight map, and that would be the last section of the map, where you eventually reach that temple place where you have to kill the Prophet of Regret. I think that could make a good Firefight map. In it, you have both an outdoor area and an indoor area, so that way you could have phantoms or pelicans drop by waves of enemies for you to fight, and you can also kind of protect the indoor area as your sector if they ever intrude in your area. Or you could also have the strategic option to mostly stay outside and just shoot down the waves as they come down on you. And you could also have various weapons and equipment kind of spawned in for you to kind of arm yourself with, and they would respawn after every end of a wave or a match or whatnot. And yeah, that's another very quick and short simple one. Maybe at the end of a sudden round, they could have one of the prophets come down on their chairs to shoot you with a big hunter laser or whatnot, and you have to kill him in order to end the round and whatnot. I think that could be a really cool idea to actually fight a prophet in Firefight. I think that could be a really cool idea. Next is the Sacred Icon level. Now, this is another tricky one since this too is very mostly close spaces and occasionally a shifting level or gondola or something. But after looking back at that level, I think that the whole area where you first encounter an enforcer sentinel, not the one in the cutscene, but the first time you actually fight these enforcers, or at least one of them, I think that little area could be a good Firefight map as well. Now, it may not look like such at first, but when you actually think about it, it could work in some way. That bigish doorish could kind of occasionally shift open, and it could let in a phantom or a pelican to let in enemies, and be it Marines, Unity, Covenant, or Flood. But also, something I forgot to mention back in the back when I talked about the Arbiter and Orca levels just previously, that it can also have Sentinels as either allies or enemies, depending on which side you may actually take or what waves you may actually fight per se. If you're fighting the Flood, chances are the Sentinels will fight alongside you. If you're maybe if fighting the Covenant or Marines or whatever, perhaps they'll be fighting you instead as part of like their own special wave or something. I don't know. These are rough ideas of mine. And another possible option for a firefight map based on this would be that big snowfield at the very end. Since there's much more open space, I'm sure there's like caverns that you'll kill, that you'll die if you fall into them. But so does the glacier level from the Halo Reach. But also you could possibly drive vehicles in it, much like the idea I kind of this similar idea I kind of forgot to bring up when I first talked about the metropolis firefight map idea as well. But yeah, that could be a good idea to have a firefight map where you can actually drive vehicles in an open-ish field, not exactly a big plane, but still free enough that you can actually fast enough that you can actually drive around in it. Now, Quarantine Zone, I think, could be good use of taking that idea of the whole snow cavern field idea that I brought up back when I talked about Sacred Icon, and kind of utilize that here instead. And plus, since I can't really think of anything else other than, well, a moving gondola, which is kind of cool, but I don't think kind of lends itself well to being a good firefight map, like with the regret level I mentioned. But that said, I think this and the previous level, the Sacred Icon level, they both could have an Enforcer Sentinel act as kind of like the final boss or kind of the final enemy to fight at the end of a wave or a round. So yeah, I forgot to bring it up, so I'll mention it now, get it out of the way. And yeah, as with before, this could be a good level to utilize a range of vehicles to use, like Warthogs, Spectres, Scorpions, Wraiths, Banshees, and so on. At least those that are actually available in the Halo 2 game and its engine. So yeah, you still have a different range of enemies to fight depending on which side you take. You can fight either Marines, or Elite, or Covenant, or Sentinels, or the Flood, of course. You can fight various different Floods. The human combat forms, the Elite combat forms, infections, carriers, and yeah, you could even have some of those combat forms driving vehicles as well, just like in the actual levels. So yeah, there's a lot to think about if you got enough creativity and imagination. In terms of the gravemind level, this was another challenge to kind of walk through and think about, since most of it is basically just venturing around the depths of High Charity and kind of going up lifts or floating across bridges and just kind of roaming around and firing various Covenant enemies, and occasionally rescue a few Marines from prison. But there is one bit that, or at least two bits exactly, in this that could work as firefight maps, and those are the two, I'd say garden areas, but they're more like open spaced rocky areas that they seem to have a high chance for some reason, like some kind of botanic, like some kind of garden, I guess, except there's not really much much plant life there, at least not as much as you'd expect. But there are a lot of steep rocky hills, and some platforms that could help in making a kind of Firefight map where various ways could kind of scan across, and you have to really think strategically with a bit of close quarters combat, kind of having to find them up close, or maybe from stay in one platform and just kind of take down certain enemies as they kind of come down to fight you, be they again the Covenant or Marines or the Spartans, Flood, or any of that sort. So yeah, the mind you, there are actually two of these in the Gravemind level where you kind of stumble into this kind of big biodome area of just mostly like steep rocky hills, and of course some few bare bits of plant life. So those could potentially work. Where the Phantoms could land is kind of hard to say, but it could easily just float in and just kind of let down the enemies through that little floaty lift thing that it has in the belly part of it. I forget what it's called. If there's a fancy term in it in the Halo lore, I probably haven't looked up that little bit of detail. But yeah, that I think either one of those two sections could work well as a 5-up map based on the Gravemind level. Another idea I had for a possible Firefight map based on the Gravemind level would be that area, the Arbiter Mausoleum area, where you have elites and brutes kind of fighting each other. And while there's not really much in terms of kind of an open space where phantoms and pelicans could come down, I think it still could be good for waves to come in from either of the doors, and you have to find them off. And I think in a case like this, and as with the some of the levels that will come later, even if you could have, even if you play as an elite or a Spartan, you could still have brutes and and jackals and drones and that as a kind of enemy, since this is technically during or after the Great Schism, where the elites kind of rebel against the rest of the Covenant because of the whole replacing with brutes thing. So I think that could still work as a kind of good 5-up map regardless. Plus, like with the actual campaign level itself, it would be good to have the actual Blow Me Away song by Breaking Benjamin, even though that'll be probably unlikely due to, I don't know, copyright licenses with 343 Industries and whoever in the band itself, and whatever music company actually owns the song and Breaking Benjamin's music. The next one, Uprising, is another similar case where after a bit of thinking and maybe a little adjustments here and there, I think it could work as a 5-up map. And in terms of this one, I went on with the section near the end where you're in that kind of 8-shaped cavern with like the little bridge in the middle, and there's kind of these like forest structures surrounding some of the parts of it, and there's a little cave in that kind of leads you to the end of the level, except in this case it will kind of be blocked off. In fact, any entrances or exits will be kind of blocked off, so you can kind of stay in this particular map or level. And I guess a way, since it's technically underground-ish, I guess there could be like an energy shield or field or whatever, where the enemies will like come in and you have to like fight them off to protect the zone or sector that you're in. And apart from that, there's really not a lot to say or think of much regarding a 5-up map based on the Uprising level in particular. But if I really had to think of that, I think that's probably the closest I could possibly think of to being a proper Firefight map. So yeah, so likewise, this one you can still either play as a Spartan or an elite, like with any of the other hypothetical firefight maps that I've kind of tried to kind of think up of. So you could still drive around a wraith, so you can still use that to your advantage. Be it like if if an enemy uses it and you can kind of hijack it and kind of use it. Although again, that could give you an unfair advantage. So you could let you have a ghost or a warhog or a spectre instead. But yeah, that's not really a lot to say for a level that in itself hasn't offer a lot to say either. Now for the penultimate level, High Charity, this is another quick one I think could work well as a 5 map, and that is the end of the level where as soon as you go off the last lift, you see the whole area where there's like the big glowing green wire thing that kind of connects to the Forerunner ship at the center of the High Charity city place. And I think that could work because of its very open space where Phantoms and Pillars could come in and kind of drop off enemies for you to fight off, or maybe allies for you to fight alongside with as well. And it has good balance of open space and close quarters, so you could utilize both firearms and melee attacks. So you could kind of think of a good range of strategies to kind of fight off the waves and how to defend as well as attack the enemies and kind of hide out if your energy shields are low or if you need some time to recover or kind of reload or kind of swap out a few weapons. So yeah, that I think that little part there could also do well as a good 5 map based on the High Charity level. And so we come to the last level of Halo 2, the final journey. And this was certainly no easy task because looking back at this level, it's not very shall I say easy to pick out what could make a good firefight map out of this particular level, since it's basically just you roaming through a canyon, well, not a box one, just like a kind of ravine of sorts, then just going through some corridors, freeing your fellow elites and hunters, and then kind of escorting a scarab with a banshee, and of course having to fight Tartarus inside the activation room. But I have thought of two ideas for a particular 5 based on this particular level. The first being that open area where you first see the scarab, and with some alterations, of course. For starters, the entrance that you kind of go into, you kind of exit out of the ravine or canyon or whatever into that open cliff area. That will be kind of blocked off, of course, and the entrance to that top area where you kind of go up to see Johnson and the other hostage Marines kind of fight against the brutes and kind of hijack the scarab. And of course, speaking of which, the scarab won't be there, of course, that's definitely out. But that little area, instead of having to go through an elaborate corridors and bridges just to get up there, you'll probably go through like just a series of stairs or maybe like a grav lift or something, and it will just lead you to the top area there. Now, I think this could be a area good area to kind of get your new weapons and kind of have banshees there to actually fight off some of the various phantoms and pelicans that would kind of fly by to drop off enemies. And the lower area could be good to use ghosts, specters, and warhogs to fight off the various enemies as well, be they be they the Covenant, the UNSC Spartans and Marines, and even the Flood as well. So that could be a good way to make a firefight map. The other option I thought of would be the actual interior of the activation room itself, where you eventually fight Tartarus. I think that could be a good place for a firefight map as well, possibly. Just a secondary idea. In it, you kind of start off in that platform in the center, and enemies will kind of come in from the entrance, from the corridor, and you have to fight them off to protect the sector or the zone or whatever. It's not as open spaced as my first idea, but I think it could be a good alternative option. So there's that. And with all that, that's finally me done with this second part of this trilogy. And boy, I was underestimating this one, because considering the amount of levels this game has compared to the previous one and the one afterwards, it is a lot, and I had to take a lot of time thinking about it and kind of scurrying through the levels and to kind of remember what the levels themselves were like, and what certain specific areas and sections could be good as potential candidates for firefight maps. So this is probably going to be a very long video. So without the way, soon enough I will get to part 3 and close out this trilogy by looking at Halo 3 and what parts of its levels could work as firefight maps, and hopefully it won't be long as this one, as there are less levels to deal with. So, with that said, this is HRC Stanley, signing down. Peace.